All right, as we mentioned, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just finished up his appearance at the Economic Club of Minnesota, where he covered a large number of topics regarding the state of the economy, the Trump administration's desire for lower interest rates, and how the U.S. will navigate the ongoing situation in Venezuela. So joining us now to break it all down is the woman who moderated that wide-ranging conversation, Michelle Caruso Cabrera. She's the CEO of MCC Global Enterprises, also a CNBC contributor. Michelle, there's a lot to unpack here. So maybe from your standpoint as the person who did the interview, what were the highlights for you?
First, I was very interested to hear what Treasury's involvement in Venezuela. I knew it had to be extensive because it's Treasury that imposes sanctions. If the oil is going to move in Venezuela, the sanctions have to be removed. So him explaining that process, how money's going to go into escrow. And then what was also important, I thought, was he described the calls he's getting from potential oil investors in Venezuela. There's been a lot of skepticism about whether or not the majors were going to go in. And he realizes that because a lot of them have, boards of directors, et cetera. They're much more bureaucratic, but that they're hearing from what you would call the equivalent of wildcatters, people who will go in. They're a little more intrepid. People in the oil industry have been in difficult places all over the world, and he thinks that they're going to have a lot of interest from those type of investors to go in there and help Venezuela rebuild its oil facilities, which are going to be needed. And he thinks that, in just a few months, there's going to be a big increase if they can get started in the amount of production. The other thing that I thought was interesting was he thinks we're going to see the biggest refunds in history from taxpayers. And once he said it, it made sense to me. They passed the big, beautiful bill. It's retroactive, but they never did any new kind of rescheduling, new withholding schedules, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot of items that people are going to be able to reduce their taxes by or actually get refunds, whether it's the lower rates or it's no taxes on tips. And so as a result, he thinks that's going to be one of the biggest in history. And also he wants to get very aggressive on cracking down on the welfare fraud that we've seen that's happened here in Minnesota and has really caught a lot of the state officials even by surprise at how widespread it appears to be.
Yeah, so I would think amid all of that, Michelle, is $50 oil like a real target that they're aiming for? And what happens to the shale producers who are, not going to be thrilled by that?
Yeah, he did not. So I didn't ask him that question. I wish I had now that you mention it. But I will say that he's very focused on affordability, which is why they're going to increase the deduction on a new car when it comes to how much interest you pay, et cetera. Very, very focused on that, supportive of the president's desire to prohibit institutional investors from buying single family homes. So if the price of oil falls, I'm not convinced that that's going to bother him very much because he's very concerned, just like the president is, about reducing costs. And so lower oil prices will mean lower prices at the pump as well.
Michelle, oil and Venezuela are front of mind right now for very obvious reasons, but maybe not too far behind that is what's going to happen with America's central bank in the next 6 months. And I know that conversation had to have drifted at some point towards the Fed, its policies and interest rates. Secretary Bessent, alongside others in the Trump administration, have been very vocal about the need for America to have lower interest rates. So what exactly is the new evolution, if you will? It's not exactly revolutionary, but what exactly does Secretary Bessent think about that situation right now?
Yeah, he thinks the neutral rate is somewhere between 2.5% and 3%. He was very clear about that. So clearly he wants the numbers to go lower. And the other thing that surprised me was, I thought most of the reporting indicated that there were only two people left in the running, the two Kevins, Kevin Warsh and Kevin Hassett. But he says, no, actually, there are four still, Chris Waller and also Rick Reeder. And that Rick Reeder hasn't had his interview yet. And so, the president's going to decide, but he's got to do that interview still. And he mentioned how much money Rick Reeder manages over at BlackRock as the CIO of the Global Fixed Income Fund. And that he was also the only one who didn't have any kind of central bank or, Fed experience, et cetera. And I asked him if that was actually something that would benefit Rick Reeder. And he said, that's up to the president. He wouldn't show his hand there. But he reiterated that there's still four in the running.